During lunch, I heard our behavioral teacher call on the radio to administrators for assistance.
Thursday, August 15th began as any other day in the life of Kendra Rogers, an assistant principal in Corsicana, Texas. But just by doing her job as an educator, it was the day that changed her life.
When I arrived, the teacher and students were outside the classroom. I entered where the student was still irate and found the room ransacked with overturned furniture. He picked up a chair and acted as if he would throw it. He finally did throw it at me, but I caught it midair. He threw a wooden hanger at me, but I couldn't stop it fast enough. The hanger hit me in my right eye and knocked it out of the socket.
Doctors told her she may be permanently blind in that eye. Much of the blame, she says, falls into the hands of the Texas government, saying if schools were adequately funded, that student would have been in a different classroom with the care they needed, not violently lashing out at students and teachers. We shared her message with Texas lawmakers.
What happened to me should never happen to another educator.
No educator should be worried about their safety at school.
No teacher in Texas should be at risk.
For the last few years, a bloc of Republican lawmakers, with Governor Greg Abbott leading the charge, have pushed for allocating taxpayer money for private schools. Public education advocates say that money belongs in public schools. Meanwhile, the scrutiny over public education, from curricula and accountability to safety and resourcing, has grown without raising the basic student allotment since before the pandemic.
The decision to continue funding Texas public schools at 2019 levels in 2024 is a choice, and the collateral damage of Governor Abbott's choices.
Now, as Texas public education finds itself at a critical juncture, how will the Texas government act?
All eyes on Texas schools.
It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money at stake, and in politics, you always follow the money.
Texas's next legislative session could make or break the education system.
I think this session will pick the ball back up.
Tonight, Rewriting Texas Education, a crisis in the classroom special.
We need to make sure that teacher organizations, their lobbyists, and superintendents and their organizations don't come in and testify in public hearings that they'd rather not have new money for public schools and that they'd rather not have new money for teacher compensation if they can kill 40,000 education savings accounts for special needs and free and reduced lunch kids.
Texas has more public school students than 48 other states, but it ranks 37th in per student spending and 42nd in per student funding. Now, as the legislature is preparing to return to the Capitol for another session focused on allocating public money toward private schooling, how will Texas rewrite its education system? My co-host this evening is CBS Austin's Michael Atkinson, who covers the legislature and has reported extensively on the school choice battle.
Well, the chamber to watch has always been the Texas House of Representatives. Last year, the House voted against a vouchers-like plan decisively, and since then, school choice proponents have worked to flip the votes. Not even a day after the November election, Governor Greg Abbott claimed victory for school choice, saying the legislature had enough votes to pass a vouchers-like plan.
Counting what I call only true hardcore school choice proponents, there are 79 votes in favor in the Texas House. It takes 76 votes to get it passed.
How they got there, though, is virtually unprecedented. Governor Abbott endorsed primary challengers to several anti-voucher Republicans, members of his own party, and was mostly successful. 11 of his endorsements were successful, putting the House closer to school choice than ever. But critics have said Governor Abbott is counting his chickens before they hatch.
We don't yet have a school voucher plan in front of us, but once we see the nuts and bolts of how all of this works, that's when we'll see if lawmakers choose to endorse the plan or not. Michael, that being said, is it too early to really know how all of this legislation is going to work?
Well, we're assuming it's going to be something called an education savings account. Think of it sort of as a bank account managed by the state where parents would be able to access taxpayer money for their child's private education. Last session, that number was $8,000 a year.
So where does that leave the Texas legislature? Are we going to see this happen?
Well, while most experts would say that we are closer to a vouchers-like plan than ever before, especially after school choice proponents restructured the Texas House.
The only thing that was holding on to our democracy was the Texas House. And we lost a lot of that in this election.
When Glenn Rogers ran for the Texas House of Representatives 4 years ago, he campaigned as a staunch conservative.
I'm pro-life. I'm pro-gun. I'm all the things that you would consider a conservative to be. The only time I've voted against some of the other Republicans is on the issue of vouchers.
That stance would ultimately result in an end to his tenure in the House.
It doesn't matter to me who's going to come after me. I'm going to vote for my district.
After the Texas legislature's historic 88th session resulted in multiple failed attempts at approving policies allocating taxpayer money for private education, the Republican Party turned against its own, with high-profile campaigns to replace members of their own party.
And they have become the focal point of a huge effort to move the state in a few really clear policy directions.
It all goes back to these two billionaire mega donors, Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks, who are spending their fortunes transforming our state into an authoritarian theocracy.
Both hail from West Texas. Dunn is from Midland and Wilks from Cisco. Dunn made a name from an oil company, which he reportedly sold last year for billions of dollars. Wilks is a pastor at Assembly of Yahweh Church. They put their money to different groups, namely Defend Texas Liberty, which became the center of controversy when its then leader, Jonathan Stickland, met with white supremacist Nick Fuentes. When that happened, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick even put out a statement saying, "I spoke with Tim Dunn. I know him to be a man of integrity and an avid and staunch supporter of Israel." In 2022, Defend Texas Liberty, largely funded by Wilks and Dunn, endorsed a primary challenger to Governor Abbott in Don Huffines, who supported, among other things, school vouchers. Abbott ultimately won, and since then, he's upped his rhetoric in favor of vouchers. They campaigned to oust anti-voucher Republicans, and they were largely successful. Of 29 races they invested in, 18 became the Republican nominees, all of whom went on to win their elections in November.
They stay in the background. They're not out front. They're like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the wall.
Republicans in favor of school choice have declared victory.
I believe that school choice will pass.
Senator Brandon Creighton chairs the Senate Education Committee and authored several school choice education bills.
I think the true narrative is, rather than holding public education funds hostage, we're standing strong for all students in Texas.
Some Republican holdouts have all but conceded, but Democrats say they're still holding strong.
And I will never support a voucher. I don't know that our public schools would survive a universal voucher, which is the ultimate goal of the proponents.
Vouchers are just a Trojan horse attempt to totally eliminate our public schools. And I think you have to start from that standpoint. And if you want to stay in office, you've got to kiss the ring. In most cases, there's very few left that have not kissed the ring.
Did the Texas legislature go far enough to prevent the next school shooting? Why educators and lawmakers on both sides of the aisle want to go further.
When Texas lawmakers returned to the Capitol last session, it was their first chance to pass school safety reforms since a gunman killed 19 children and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary in Uvalde.
Because at the end of every day, I'm just a mom who wants my daughter back, and a mom who doesn't want another mom to know my pain.
Democrats had their sights set on a major bill, one that would raise the age to purchase certain semi-automatic firearms from 18 to 21. They argued that a law like that could have prevented the Uvalde massacre.
Despite passing key hurdles with some bipartisan support, that bill died when it missed a deadline to pass the House. Then, state leaders turned their gaze to House Bill 3, a sweeping law proponents said would change the face of school safety in Texas, including a requirement that every school have a resource officer on campus, with $15,000 for every campus. But many have said that wasn't enough. The head of school safety at the Texas Education Agency recently testified that less than half of all schools are compliant with HB 3. And he also told lawmakers $15,000 wasn't enough.
Is that number closer to $100,000 rather than the $15,000 that we had in HB 3 from the 2023 session?
Yes, sir. It's probably closer to 100 than it is to 15.
Even in certain circumstances, like the fatal stabbing of a high school student at Manor Senior High School in October, a school resource officer wasn't enough to prevent the murder.
My initial reaction to all of this was anger because you expect your children to be protected and safe.
As the legislature returns to Austin next month, will they give more money to Texas schools in the name of student safety?
Our money is there. Give us back our money.
After the break, we ask teachers, lobbyists, and politicians about education policy. Our Rewriting Texas Education Town Hall is next.
Tonight, I'm joined with Ken Zarafis, President of Education Austin, Dr. Natalie Nichols, Senior Chief of Schools and Innovation for Round Rock ISD, Laura Colangelo, Executive Director for the Texas Private Schools Association, Brian Gunther, the President of the San Marcos Academy, Andy Hogue with the Travis County Republican Party, and Pooja Sethi, Chair of the Travis County Democratic Party. We're also joined here in our studio with a live audience, and we'll hear their questions for our panel here in just a moment. But I want to just start jumping right into the conversation, beginning with a top issue for state leaders, which the name of which itself is politicized. Proponents have labeled it school choice or education savings accounts. Critics call them school vouchers. Andy, I want to start with you and talk a little bit about what this debate is going to look like as we head into this next session. How significant is the conversation going to be around school choice as we head into the next legislative session?
No, I think it's going to be the main issue. We saw what Governor Abbott did last session. It became the determinant of whether or not you got funding for your schools. So I don't think he's going to back off. Matter of fact, I see more conservative Republicans, more school choice advocates ready to fight, and Governor Abbott doubling down on his previous messages.
Pooja, I want to ask the same question to you now from the Democratic side. How significant is this battle going to be?
Oh, it's going to be really significant. It's going to be one of the top issues that are there. But as we've seen just from last session, I mean, it's died again and again, and rural Republicans and rural Republicans voted against it, a lot of them, and Democrats have voted. It's a bipartisan issue, and it died last session, and hopefully they stand their ground and stand up for public schools and public school kids.
I want to get a little more into the nuts and bolts of exactly what we're talking about here. Laura, would love to turn with you. We've obviously spoken about school choice extensively with you. I want to start by talking about exactly what we mean when we talk about this idea. You know, at the end of the day, these are public taxpayer dollars that are going towards private education. And I feel like the whole idea behind private education was to have as little state involvement as possible. So kind of explain to me how you have those two truths at the same time.
If you look at the bill from last session, we're talking about maybe 40,000 students statewide who would be able to participate in a school choice program. And there are a couple of items that we would have to see in the bill in order to support it from the TPSA standpoint, which we can talk about when we get granular. But basically, this is a way for those families who do need another option to have another option and expand the way that we do education in Texas to serve the needs of every child in the state.
To the point of what you said about it not being an either or, rather, I think the public school advocates, we'll probably hear from them in a moment, would say it is an either or. You cannot have a fully funded public education system and a school choice system. You disagree with that?
I think you can. It's a both and situation, and I think that's what we're about to discuss and hopefully pass in 2025.
With that, Ken, I want to ask you the same question. Do you think you can have both a fully funded public education system and a school choice system?
Absolutely not. I think the same thing has been bandied about throughout the country. Public is public, private is private. And it's really about public schools were made for the collective. That's our strength. When you start dealing with individuals, you get away from that larger strength, and it hurts kids.
We'll continue our town hall discussion after the break. I want to talk a little bit about last month the Texas State Board of Education gave approval to a public school curriculum that both critics and supporters have noticed is heavily influenced by Christian teachings. Public school districts are also incentivized to adopt those curricula and could earn $60 per student in their district, an incentive some schools may think is too good to resist. Natalie, I want to ask a similar question to you, turning it towards Round Rock ISD. That $60 incentive per student, is that something that Round Rock ISD would look at and say, you know what, whatever we feel about this curriculum, we need the money? Is that something you guys would consider?
I would say yes, but let me give some more information, because as always, there's so much pieces of information that's missing. So I think many people would agree, number one, the foundation of our country is religious freedom. It never said it was specifically that. It was founded on this idea of religious freedom. Many people, when we look at it again, from the perspective of looking at literature, I don't think it's the idea that we do not want these things to be included, but the conversation was that this will be included in the curriculum and then all other religions would be excluded. So the conversation is more so about the exclusion and what it says about us, the fact that we specifically did not want any other religion to be included. If the whole idea of being a Christian means I am inclusive, I show you how I love you, and what that means, then this really kind of like smacks you in the face that it's the exact opposite of what we're supposed to be teaching. It's almost hypocritical. And our kids are very smart. They call us on it. They watch all of this information and they make judgment about the adults in the building, the fact that we would do this. What does it say then? So it's something as adults we really need to pay attention to. What message are we sending to our children and to our communities based on the things that we put in front of them and what we say that they can have access to. So this is a big conversation. It's not just about the instructional material.
The sort of infusion of education and religion. I'd love to talk to you guys about what that experience has been like for you guys in the classroom, of what that looks like. Brian, I'll start with you, of what that looks like in practical, boots on the ground teaching at San Marcos Academy.
San Marcos Academy as a Baptist institution has been a part of the Baptist General Convention of Texas since its inception in 1907. As a private institution and as a Baptist institution, we have the opportunity to teach Scripture, but here's the difference going from a public classroom into a private classroom is we get to aim that from a doctrinal perspective. That's where indoctrination, if you will, comes from. We get to teach from doctrinal leanings. Our understanding and interpretation of that text is taught at San Marcos Academy. That's the opportunity that we get to do in our location, and that's what it looks like in our classrooms.
We want to thank each of our panelists for joining us here tonight. Rewriting Texas Education. We'll be right back after the break. You can watch our full town hall streaming online immediately after this at 7 p.m. on CBSAustin.com.
And thank you for joining us for our Crisis in the Classroom special, Rewriting Texas Education. I'm Walt Macaborski.
And I'm Michael Atkinson. Good night.
Thank you for watching. Please hit the subscribe button and get the latest news by downloading the CBS Austin News app.